Hello there. This is April the 14th, 2023. I have a question from Ruben and Eloise in San Ramon, California, and this is in reference to Genesis chapter 6. There are a couple of things that show up in Genesis chapter 6 that will raise some questions. For example, who are the sons of God? That's specifically what Ruben and Eloise are asking about. And there just isn't anything to say about that specifically from the text because it just says sons of God. If you read through the text, that's what it says. Later on, there is a reference to the giants, or the Hebrew word is Nephilim, and this is sometimes used in translations, so the word is not really translated. To translate this word, we don't really know who that might be. Some translations use the word giant, but this is an unknown in the sense that we don't know who this being really was necessarily. All right, so there are some issues that are raised concerning this. Let me go ahead and go into the text. Genesis chapter 6, I'll start out in verse 1 where it says, "Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful. And they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose." All right, and so on the surface, in reading from this translation, on the surface, it appears that there were other beings that were recognized as the sons of God. And the only thing we know that could correlate to this would be to say that these are angelic beings, and that means that they're either the angels or they are the demons, one of the two, and that they are embracing the daughters of men, and that there is this union that apparently takes place. All right? So proceeding from there, in verse 3, "And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. And it was about 120 years after this that the flood of Noah came. If we use some reasonable approximations, it has been suggested that that is a reasonable understanding of this. But that's not what this question is about. In verse 4, "There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown." Okay, so in verse 4, the word translated for giants, I have my Hebrew text over here on my left. That's the Nephilim. In verse 4, it appears that the union of these angelic beings with the daughters of men produces children, and that these children are recognized as the people of renown, the people who are considered to be giants in this translation. They're distinct, they're different in some way, but we don't really have the details of what these differences might be. But what we do know is that from verse 3, the Lord is not excited about what's taking place here, that this is not in his interest. And so I'm going to suggest that these are not the angels of God. These are the fallen angels of God. These are the demonic powers who are interacting with the ladies, and that children are being born. Now, the immediate question that should be asked is, does this mean that a demon and a lady could engage with one another such that the ladies would bear children? That's the question that's at hand. And if you read the text just from the surface, from this point of view, you could say, well, I suppose that's what was happening. So the next question that should come from that would be, well, then why doesn't it happen anymore? Or why is it not happening in any way that we would be able to correlate between what was described here and what could be happening right now? Considering that we don't have any examples of this, I would suggest that this this surface level description is not really what was happening. It is a description of what people believed was happening. And I'll come back to this in just a few minutes, all right? It was the perception of the people that they believed that this is what was taking place, but it wasn't really happening in this way. This is just the description of the perception of the people. There was activity, of course, of some kind, but that the behavior of the people and the demonic powers related to this apparently was not approved of by God. All right, considering verse 3. Also, if you keep reading into, let's go ahead and read into verse 5. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. All right, so considering you've got verse 3 and verse 5 giving the Lord's feelings on this matter, all right, or his perception of what's taking place, and you got verse 4 right in between of this kind of behavior, then this suggests that this behavior that was taking place was not approved of by God. It was considered to be an expression of evil, and that this, I'm going to say, is the perception of the people, that that the demons were engaging with the ladies in this respect, and that children were being born. It was the belief that these were the children of the devil, if I was to use that kind of an expression. All right. Now, there were behaviors that were kind of unique, different from others. That we have the description of the people of renowned, renowned in a negative sense, probably, considering the Lord's perception of these matters. That this renowned activity, this expression of the people who were the children of the devil, was not recognized as something good. All right. Now, could it be that these people had some unique abilities that were different from others? That's reasonable to consider that. All right. But it doesn't have to be the result of some kind of union between the demons and the ladies that produces children. It doesn't have to be that. It could very well have been explained as the demons were influencing the physiology of these children who grew up to be men of renown. They were influencing the physiology in a way that there were some differences that would be recognized as being unique. All right. I'll give you an example. We know throughout the scriptures that there's plenty of testimony concerning the demonic powers influencing the physiology of people in negative ways. All right, that would result in sickness and paralysis, stuff like that. We have examples that would suggest that the demons do have the ability to influence our physiology in a negative way. And so it could also be done in another way that could be considered to be positive if there's an increase in strength or other things that could be different and unique. This could be a manifestation of a demonic influence within physiology that does not require some kind of new being that is produced from the union of the demons and the ladies. It doesn't require that at all. Okay, that this would just simply be the perception of the people at this time. This is what they thought was taking place, but it wasn't really taking place, and the demons gave the illusion that this is what was happening. All right, so we don't have some kind of unique race of beings that have a different kind of genetic code, which is what it would take, some kind of genetic modification between the demons and the people that would result in a new being of some kind, someone who is no longer human because there is a genetic alteration, all right, to suggest that by giving this new word, Nephilim. Okay? For there to be that kind of adjustment or that kind of change or modification through the demons and the people, I would say that that's not possible. One of the reasons why is because you don't see any examples of that. I mean, if that was happening, then we could see something like that happening right now. We could do tests on that. There could be analysis done. This is just not real, which tells me that it cannot happen. All right, I have the opinion that it cannot possibly take place. All right, so with the ability of the demons to influence a person's physiology, there can be the perception, all right, the perception that this is what you've got. But now what about the union of the ladies and the demonic powers? All right, how could that be represented? Okay, now to answer this kind of a question, I'm going to talk about something that I do not want to encourage you to pursue. All right, I studied this in the past when I was younger in the faith. A long time ago, I studied this only because it was just a matter of circumstance. When I was younger in the faith, I did encounter a number of people who were a part of the satanic world in the sense that they were Satanists, very much involved in satanic ritualistic practices, and that these were people who I personally encountered. It was just because of being at certain places at certain times. I encountered these kinds of people, a lot of them, and my encounters with them, for the most part, I mean, there were a few exceptions, but for the most part, these were people who were wanting to get out of these kinds of generational ritualistic families and groups of people that they were a part of. All right, and they were wanting to know how they could heal, how they could overcome a lot of the abuse that they experienced in the past. So it was just a matter of being at certain places and certain times when I interacted with these kinds of people, met these kinds of people. And part of my spending time with these people was not just about having discussions, but some of them had written some extensive journals. All right, and I did have a few of them give me a copy of their journals, which I studied carefully and prayerfully, of course, as well. And through my experience of reading through these journals and talking with these people personally, I learned a lot about satanic rituals and their purposes and the objectives and how that would have an effect on the psychology and on the minds of people who are participating in these things. All right, so I've had exposure to this. I studied this, and like I said, it was when I was younger in the faith. It's been a long time since I've had any interaction with people on this level, just because I've been doing other things and I haven't encountered these kinds of people. And I'm okay with that. Just because I have a knowledge base concerning this doesn't mean that I should be actively involved until I am dead, kind of thing for the rest of my life with that kind of stuff. And again, I don't want to encourage anybody to pursue these things. If it's a part of your life experience and the Lord prepares pathways for you such that you find yourself interacting with people who are involved in these things, then work with it and be sensitive to the leading of the Holy Spirit. So I've told you all of that in order to say this, okay? I'm not going to give you details concerning the ritualistic practices that were taking place. But what I can say with great confidence is that what I see here in Genesis chapter 6, in the beginning here of Genesis chapter 6, what I see is a description of a few of the satanic rituals that I know took place a long time ago and have been taking place ever since and are still taking place today. All right, that this to me is a description of a satanic ritual, and that it is not the unification or the union of a demon with a lady. All right, what this is this is the belief and the perception of the people who are participating in this kind of ritual. It is the belief and the perception, but it's not really what's happening. Okay, it's not really what's happening. So I'm just going to say that, and I'm not going to give you all the gory details concerning what takes place. I'm just going to say that this is a representation of a satanic ritual that is the perception of the people, but it's not really what's happening. And if there is any unique behavior or abilities that might be represented with children who are born, I'm going to say that that's a demonic influence similar to the ways that demons can cause harm to someone else. They can manipulate our physiology and cause problems. And we have examples of people being healed. I myself have been involved in the healing of others who were afflicted by demons, and that these demonic influences resulted in physical manifestations that went away when we did some biblical intervention. All right. And so I'm going to say that that's it, that this is not, that the Nephilim is not some different kind of being or a different kind of person, but that this is just an individual who had demonic influence that was not recognized as something that would need to be healed, some kind of physical problem, but instead influenced the physiology in a different way that resulted in the people being recognized as being of the renowned. All right. So let me keep reading a little bit more and see what happens. So again, in verse 5, then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. In verse 6, and the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. Okay, which is a profound description of the feelings of God. All right? God feels sorry. He feels bad, and he recognizes that, that there was the part of this was his involvement and his fault. He created man and gave people the ability to decide what they were going to do, if they're going to do good or if they're going to do evil. He gave us that capacity, that ability. And, he recognizes that his part in this, that he could say that it's his fault to some extent. So he's going to make a correction. He's going to do what he can do, which is to just simply destroy everything, to include the creeping things and the animals. You're just going to wipe everything out. All right? And that was his description of what he was about to do with what's recognized as the flood of Noah. Okay? So that's how he felt about these circumstances. And then he declared that he would never do this again. Next time he destroys the earth, he's going to do it by fire, not by water. Okay? But since then, there have been some occasions when these kinds of practices that upset him to the extent where he destroyed the entire earth, these practices are still taking place in small ways and in secret, and they have been taking place ever since. So that's my explanation of Genesis chapter 6 and the Nephilim and this topic of the sons of God, and was there really this kind of union taking place, and were there really children being born? I would say no. I'd say that this is a perception, and there are many other examples in the scriptures that I could point to where we could say that definitely was not true, but it was the perception of the people. Okay, so this is just one of them. All right, I hope that this was helpful. If you have any other questions for me, do send them to me directly by email to aaron@aaronbudgeon.net. Thanks.